Good afternoon, folks. It's Saturday, August 8th, 17 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I totally meant to kick this off so I could read this at 12 p.m. But damn it, I'm all off kilter today. Regardless, welcome to 2020 Election Madness Countdown. My graphic is out of date. We are no longer at day 90. I think it's day 85 or 84. I haven't double checked with the rest of the world on what day we are. But it's counting down. Trumptopia is bracing itself for the single most anticipated and already contested election in living memory. Hello and namaste, friends. I am your imaginary radio DJ opinion talk show host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And this is 2020 Election Madness Countdown. So, where to begin? I don't even know. In my conscious adult lifetime, observing the political shenanigans of this country formerly known as the United States of America, now currently transforming into the glorious empire of Trumptopia, I have never felt as much of a wound-up, complex anxiety of anticipation in the populace, not in myself so much, but in the voter electorate, in the body politic, as it were, that I can recall. This is, I honestly believe, the most contentious, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, words, sometimes they fail to show up in my brain, but in anticipation of the vote, I have never experienced so much presumptuous contentiousness about it. Like, everyone is presuming so much about what may or may not happen and arguing about it preemptively, like the incumbent president is preemptively, that's the word I was looking for earlier, attempting to negotiate the notion that the election is not to be trusted. And yet he wants you to trust him to get him reelected. To preemptively dismiss, undermine, and attempt to belittle and destroy the confidence, the trustworthiness, the viability, all the terms you can imagine, in anticipation, ahead of time. It's a new stroke of genius from the great Orange King of Trumptopia. He's the self-proclaimed king, mind you. This tactic, this choice he's making, forgive me, it's more than that, because as I've always said, and forgive me for sounding like a broken record, but the man is not dumb. And if you're busy filled with hate and dismissing him as an idiot, then you are missing out on a whole range of considerations that might influence your opinion about what to do next. The man is not our savior either, right? Take the two extremes and cancel them out, and you find your answer somewhere in the middle, in my humble opinion. So, like, the man is not, he is not the stable genius that he claims to be. He's a bit of a dotard. He's a bit of an elderly fella who's, in the beginnings of disarray, because that's what happens to people. That's what will happen to me and you, dear friends, when we hit those age ranges. And until we radically transform our entire food production system and our entire conceptualization of what healthy food is, etc., until we become breatharians or breatharians, whichever. I've already gone off on this subject, but I can't help but bring it up every time I have to say the word. I always thought it was breatharians, like vegetarians, right? And that may be due to the simple fact that English is not my native tongue. So some of the weirdo-ness about it is rather foreign to me, and I don't just blankly accept it and run with whatever preference I prefer. I constantly obsess over, like, why? And breatharians sounds way too much like some sort of word that's part of the lexicon of Nazi Germany, right? Like, what? Aryans? What kind of Aryans? No, I'm not talking about Aryans. Skinhead or otherwise. I'm talking about dietary life choices, right? Until I'm gonna initiate the common use law petition to change whatever the formal, actual spelling and pronunciation of this word might currently be, and say we vote to all pin it down as breatharians, because it makes sense and it's marketable. Like it makes you think of, like, okay, if going from being meat eater to a vegetarian sounds like a step, then going from being a vegetarian to being a breatharian just fits the mold. It just makes logical sense, and it doesn't freak people out. And when taken out of context, can be reverse engineered, right? Like, no one's gonna go, "Are you some kind of Nazi?" at me and try to punch me in the face for saying breatharian, because they're gonna go, "Oh, you're some sort of fancy vegetarian." Okay, I digress. Election 2020. What does that have to do with all of that? Everything is toxic. All of it, right? And in my lifetime of observing politics, wait, back up, asterisks. When I make broad, brushy stroke statements like all of it is XYZ, it is inherently couched in my notion that, counterintuitively, I first recognize that nothing in life, in this reality, in this human world of concepts and behavior of people, nothing is absolute. Unlike bumbling Joe Biden, who constantly fumbles his words and says crazy bullshit that kind of makes you want to be like, why didn't we put Bernie on the top of the ticket? I understand that nothing is an absolute. All human endeavors, whichever kind of breakdown, box, ideation, organizational chart you want to make about it, whatever label you want to use, no single human being is absolutist. Right? So I back up. But having said all that, backing up and trying to get back to my original through line, when I say the things that sound like they're approaching the absolutist level of what I judge as like, we shouldn't be doing that, know that I include wink, wink, nudge, nudge, tip to the nose, tip of the hat, say no more, a kind of bundle of thinking within that's like obviously not in absolutist, true, monolithic terms, because in every polemic, there's an overlapping gradient of complexity, right? Okay, so where was I? I totally lost track of my thoughts. I got here in a logical way, but it was such a spiral with so many brackets of like, oh wait, come back to this too. Political state right now is something that, well, if you had asked me just 3 years ago, no, well, more than 3 years ago, if you'd asked me 5.5 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined it having gotten this redonkulous. That's one thing I've got to say about all of it. And I am of a nuanced position about voting, right? As I am with most things. I try to avoid the falling into the trap of adhering to one of two polemic extremist contrary notions about how to think about things. In other words, I don't like left versus right when it comes to the political spectrum. And I try not to think in those ingrained, conditioned ways. But as I've gone to great lengths to share with you, my friends, we've all suffered conditioning on multiple levels, and it's really, really, really thick. It's dense. It's the conditioning touches on everything, including politics, obviously. So what does it mean? What am I trying to say? Why am I spiraling and rambling out of control? I don't know if the episode in which I said this idea that I'm referencing next is still up or not, but it should eventually find its way back up when I finally drag my ass into doing all the upgrades that I intend to do to the show. Knock on wood, I may actually get that done before the end of this year. Before the election, before November. So that by November, as we move into whatever the next chapter is, the podcast that is everything that came before November is as professional and post-production, like quality, like I've done all the things I talked to myself about doing in post. Okay. What does it mean? Where are we? We are barreling towards an election that is being criticized, characterized, and actualized in the most openly jacked up, corrupt, and manipulated form that we've ever witnessed as political participants in these kinds of shenanigans. Mind you, I'm not a statist, right? Like, I don't have blind faith belief in the state apparatus. I'm not an anti-statist because I don't like those polemics. I don't like those self-contradictory, creating tension, creating conflict arrangements, right? I don't buy into us versus them thinking. I do think that given a choice right now, in this moment, between disengaging, like not voting at all, and doing the opposite, I would encourage others who might be on the fence, who might have never voted before, or who might be contemplating walking away from voting, all of those demographics, to consider that maybe the best thing would be to hashtag flood the system, flood the vote. Those are two different hashtags. Hashtag flood the vote. Hashtag flood the system. Why? Because depending on which poll you think isn't totally crazy and corrupt, over 45% of eligible voters in the total population of Trumptopia do not vote. So all y'all leave it to the minority percentage to elect your next puppet, right? And so no wonder everyone's jaded and burnt out, and we ended up with something like this. The voting perpetually for the lesser of two evils gets you into a slippery slope downward spiral towards some extreme polemic of two evils, right? Okay. Non-participation is something that's been engaged in. And I have to admit, we have a complex, confusing, sophisticated situation. I call it the Schrodinger's voting box paradox. And I've memeified it already, right? Without the, I should have, no, I think I need to update the wording, but I digress. As, not Winston Churchill, who was it? Somebody, not the Kentucky Fried Chicken Colonel. What's his name? Mississippi River guy. Oh my God, my brain is being so goofbally lame right now. I apologize to you guys. Mark Twain. Wait a minute and it'll come to you, right? As Mark Twain pointed out, whenever it was he said it or wrote it, if voting mattered, they wouldn't let us do it. But as I have pondered this thing ever since I came across it, this statement, this wise, sarcastic dismissal of the entire voting system. And there's a whole spectrum of ideological belief about this, right? About the degree to which the voting system is a hoax. There's truly a deep and complex, it's all a hoax culture that's been slowly and insidiously creeping and creeping and creeping. But as I like to counter Mr. Twain, quite respectfully, if voting didn't matter, why do they work so hard to prevent us from doing it? Because the one thing I've noticed as I've turned I'm like that guy that sits very near the front of the movie theater and likes to turn back and watch the audience during the really wacky bits of the movie that he's already seen 3 or 4 times, right? Because although that may be considered weird, I don't literally do that, but I imagine doing that. I'm going to write a character in one of my short stories that does that now. Put a pin in that on the short story section of the corkboard in the imaginary room in my mind. I like to turn around and look the other way when I find myself in a crowd of lemmings running off a cliff. I'm like, what's going on off to the south if the cliff is off to the north, right? And I say that with love because I believe that that's a fair analogy for what we always are. Until we heal ourselves and break free of the spiritual trauma and chains and addictions at all of the great meta-spiritual theory of what's wrong with us, until we achieve that work and complete it, never mind realize it's got to get done, but actually complete it, we do at a collective level sort of act like lemmings, all trying to choose which cliff to run off of. And if we're not quite full barrel running off a cliff yet, we're definitely running around in circles arguing with each other about which cliff face in which direction is the right cliff to jump off of. That's a sophisticated analogy for the complexity of human cultural behavior, and let it sit with you for a minute. It's a Zeppo original. And having observed this and noted it as a pattern, this is especially clear in politics. We have the minority of the possible voters in this country, the smallest third that is split up and arguing about the left, the right, or the third parties in the middle, which aren't really in the middle, right? They don't represent the center. They represent other directional extremes away from center, and we've accepted this notion that politics is a set of extremist polemics that refuse to meet in the middle because the middle's bad somehow, even though most people are actually sort of centrists or slightly one direction or the other leaning away from centrists, right? And we have We are barreling towards this election under this unprecedented set of conditions, and the incumbent president is the person doing the most work to undermine the election process itself, to dismiss it, to marginalize it, to vilify it, to call it evil and corrupt. Like, it doesn't... If you were just to have woken up from a coma from, like, I don't know, the Ronald Reagan era, none of this would make any sense. And I think to perhaps Ronald Reagan era and slightly just before that, political minds, this guy should look like a shady as fuck, possibly compromised, manipulated puppet president of external influence. Not because the news tells us so, even though some news does indeed. People are opining that on some news outlets. But because his own behaviors and his own actions that have, his supporters continue to cling to a short bullet list of things that he's done, and of course mantras that he's mantraed into existence. And yet, he's trying to overtly and sort of slow boil destroy one of the central pillars that makes this country what it, at its best, what it always is when it is at its best. The post office, right? And it's sad that most people can't comprehend that the post office truly is one of those things. And most of those kinds of people, I would wager, if I were a betting man, are free market or pseudo free market, nouveau millennial, anti-intellectual free marketers that don't really understand what a bullshit concept the free market is. But I digress. So he's trying to destroy that. He's trying to destroy the electorate's ability to vote safely. He's trying to destroy and marginalize key demographic components of the electorate. It's a really complex, and I don't know if he's personally managing this and it's all his brainchild. Actually, I highly doubt that. But he's definitely giving consent and playing along. One of the things that's always tickled me pink that I don't get, that people don't understand in his base, when he has said since before his first election that the system is rigged and it's corrupt, it necessitates, by definition, especially given the fact that he won, that he is given his consent to participate in it. Because there he is, and he's not actually fixing anything. Now, if he were just to have been trying to win, quote unquote, using some ruthless tactics, that would be one thing. But he's also literally trying to alter the fundamental, ground rules of the election process in a sort of slow boil, centimeter by centimeter encroachment, which is often difficult to detect even for savvy viewers. One of the most outrageous things that has ever been issued by him from his imperial Twitter account is this floating the idea of postponing the election. It is the definition of criminal hijacking of politics, manipulating the election date, right? That's why it is enshrined and encoded in our electoral legal system here in the great grand old U.S. of A. That the checks and balances stuff and the fact that the date is set and that there's no reason to change it is sort of enshrined. So, and we don't even know what other subtle or obscurely sourced tactics might be underway. And we're full circle back with the Russian thing and the Russian denial thing, right? The Russia interference is just a hoax. Hoax culture loves winning because it can say everything's a hoax. People are going to accuse me of being a hoax. And I assure you, friends, hand metaphorically on sacred texts, whatever favorite sacred text would take for you to believe that I'm taking this vow seriously, whichever hand you want it to be, I will do it. Not because I'm a shuckster and a shill, but because I mean it. No one is paying me to do this. And if I ever do make money from doing it, it'll just be through the good old-fashioned free market monetization through advertising, so that I can turn it into a career. But what I mean is, like, George Soros isn't giving me a check, and neither is anybody from anywhere else. There are no foreign entities funding me. In fact, to be quite blunt, I am dead ass broke. But that's neither here nor there. I'm doing this show because of the passion that I have for commenting on the current real life events of our time. And so to kind of try and come full circle, we are on the precipice of what could be the most revolutionary of elections. And I say this with a sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge vibe right here. But one of the most sort of suddenly forgotten, insert that, although what's his name's so not popular right now, Forrest Gump meme about, and then, all of a sudden, everyone forgot about this. But it seems like even his own base, and not Trump this time, but Bernie Sanders, it seems like even Bernie Sanders' own base has failed to recognize the significance of the fact that Bernie Sanders is technically still on the DNC ticket, and we have not hit the convention yet. And the Electoral College has not accepted the full withdrawal of Bernie as a potential candidate. And that we could, or they could, because I'm not technically attached to any political party or any political puppet, as it were. But if I were, I would be central. I would try to get myself involved in the activity of reminding people that Bernie's still on the ticket, and that with the right kind of political grassroots movement organization, instead of wasting time on Facebook, you could be achieving the superseding of Joe Biden as the presumptive nominee. You could be forcing the DNC's hand to take the people's choice, because this is supposed to be representative politics and not oligarchical politics and not tyrannical politics, right? Don't even get me started on all the ways in which I do not even really believe that Biden is a better candidate than Trump. Because tragically, when you really get down to the nitty-gritty of their policies, they don't actually disagree on things so much in terms of what they would what I think or I'm concerned they would continue to try and do. Obviously, there is a huge gap where the things they have in common stop, and they are quite seemingly different on the surface, especially in the sort of puppet theater level of which Trump is wearing quite overtly the black hat, while pretending to wear the white hat, because it's all like double reverse psychology. And that's a very specifically chosen phrasing, double reverse psychology. It isn't plain old-fashioned, regular, boring reverse psychology. It's double reverse psychology, folks. Let me clarify what I'm trying to say. In a perfect world, if I had like political gravitas in this system, for whatever reason, if I were some sort of famous billionaire playwright or movie maker, or I guess movies would be a touchy. They wouldn't want me unless I was the rebel that was like exposing the Hollywood elite in my own Hollywood work. I guess whatever variable of like I've got some public political popularity and sway. This is what I'd be saying. I'm being authentic. I would accept if Biden really had to be the only viable alternative, but I would push for and endorse the Bernie Sanders option until it absolutely was, hardcore proven to me that it wouldn't fly. And I don't know what percentage, because I don't know how hard they poll non-voting citizens of America, right? Because to come back to that number, 44% of American citizens that are eligible to sign up to the voting game and play it do not. Some of them do it on purpose, right? Because they're abdicate the vote folks. And I have a lot of respect. I used to almost belong to that camp. But I keep coming back to that thing, to this Schrodinger's paradox of Mark Twain's claim and my own of like, why do they try so hard? Redlining, gerrymandering, all the litany of tools that both parties, to some degree or another, engage in, while Democrats obviously on the surface wear the white hat of challenging the Republicans for engaging in such nefarious voter manipulation tactics, et al., the government itself spends a lot of time and effort trying to make voting a pain in the arse and unappealing to people and difficult and just plain old-fashioned, literally hard to do. And in my mind, instead of acquiescing, instead of giving them what they want, which is a smaller and smaller and smaller electorate, a smaller and easier to manipulate body of voters, I think we should get the 45 or 47 or 49% of the eligible voters in Trumptopia to just flood the system. I would love to see a really detailed demographic breakdown of political opinions of that demographic. Now, do they all just uniformly, and I doubt it, right? Because nothing is a monolith. But could it be? I think they are dismissed as such by the political insiders. Well, they're not voting, so they all must generally not give a fuck. That must be their political stance. But I bet that it's much more nuanced than that, and I bet that if given like the mental, psychological motivation and permission to abandon or temporarily set down their refusal to vote in order to just prove the point and just hand over a walloping bitch smack of here's what the rest of us think into the system, I just want to know what that would be like. And if there was ever a year, dear friends and listeners, to pull that off, it could be now. Do we have time? Well, the clock is ticking. The countdown's on. We have 84 days to the big hot minute. Will you help me, dear listener? If you are listening to this, and it kind of doesn't matter if you are an American citizen or not, because all you need to do is get this episode into the earballs of other legally eligible American voters I would love to see this flooding of the whole thing, which personally, and here's why, right? Like, people may like, what are you talking about? There's a lot of folks out there that I have come across in my survey of the political discourse landscape that want to do the opposite. They want to tear it all down somehow, metaphorically or literally. There must be a cluster of non-voting activists whose goal in life is to pull everybody out of the voting system, to try to get everyone to just bail on it. And they're approaching, with equity to all political parties, this notion. And I used to support that because that would also be fascinating. What would happen if one electoral cycle, zero participation occurred? I think, though, in analyzing the two situations and their possible outcomes, I have, as of late, for the last, 2.5 presidents, been much more interested in finding out what would happen if everybody on the non-participating side of the divide just set down their pride and set down their whatever prohibition and rejection of participation in the electoral process, and whatever snobbery may be part of that whole emotional trip for them, in order to vote for Bernie Sanders in this particular scenario today, or somebody absurdist like a write-in campaign. What if we got 80% of the 47% of people who don't vote, right? We don't need 100, but what if we got 80% of them to write in somebody funny, but somebody real, like that's also actually eligible, so it isn't a totally wasted vote. And it used to be, when I first decided to take this idea public, which I'd been ruminating on it for quite some time, I tried to launch, very unsuccessfully, a grassroots movement for a write-in campaign for John Oliver and, not John Oliver, dang it. Although, if he were an eligible citizen of the United States, I would totally pick him, but I don't think he would be, right? Having not been born here. Like myself. Colbert, Stephen Colbert, and the other guy whose name now, God forbid, I sound like such an ass, I can't remember what it is. Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. Just took me a second to pull that out from the dusty, moldy bin of memory. But imagine if we got a tidal wave of votes that no one was expecting, and we crammed into office a ticket through the sheer brute force of saying, haha, isn't it cute? All of you tiny minority of Republican and or Democrat statists, you think you have the final say, but there's so many more of us that do not vote that we can put 2 stand-up comedians into office, right? Or, I don't know, somebody that wouldn't be an evil, nefarious, tyrannical wannabe, but that might actually do something awesome, right? Might actually, somebody progressive and groovy and healing. What's his name? Is it William Kamau Bell? I'm terrible at names, forgive me, guys. But the host of 50 Shades, or the United Shades of America. Not 50 Shades. Erase that. Erase. But imagine if William Kamau Bell and somebody else hilarious, I can't think of, an awesome lady comic. That's terrible. And it's not inherent bias. I'm just bad at names. I almost didn't remember William Kamau Bell's name, right? But insert awesome lady comics name here. You get my point. My point is, there's enough of you out there, America. The irony of everybody who's ever used the phrase silent majority is that there really truly is a silent majority. Now, the thing is, I doubt that whenever Donald Trump uses that phrase, he understands that the silent majority he's imagining isn't the actual silent majority that's out there. I could be wrong. I hope I'm not. But I would love to find out. And I think it would be fascinating to just flood it. So if you are a voting eligible citizen of the United States of Trumptopia and you haven't voted, I humbly invite you to contemplate the notion, to rally around either Bernie Sanders, because he would be even if you don't know him, even if you think you don't like him, he would be a better political puppet to have in office that would give us one of those upbeat, everyone gets a break, everyone gets to feel a little bit of aspirational healing and growth, because it's a pendulum swing of a theater play, friends. And I've come really full circle because I was trying to remember or reference that statement from very early on in my podcast. And I started rambling about how I fucked up the show. I should have just left everything alone and not reorganized it. But that's a whole nother story, which I've already rambled about. So friends, forgive me. It's come to be that moment in time where I gotta disengage from the circular thinking and stop rambling at you, because it's been 41 minutes and 44 seconds of it already. I hope you found it interesting, thought-provoking, and maybe a little bit inspiring. And until next time, I humbly hope that you question everything. Take a moment to just give meditation a chance and set down your political ideology. And remember that behind all those constructs, every person is one of our brothers and sisters, and we got to get beyond the tribalistic warfare of politics if we ever want to actually get shit done. Hashtag flood the system. Hashtag flood the vote. Also hashtag heal the system.